We know word of mouth marketing is the most trusted, most unadulterated form of marketing, the best advertising you could ever have. And yet, Lee, how many companies have you worked with that have a line item in their budget for word of mouth marketing? None. It's almost completely ignored. And yet, that is something AI cannot touch.
Influential and thought-provoking minds in marketing, sales, and business. The Business of Marketing Podcast.
Welcome again to the Business of Marketing. I'm A. Lee Judge. You know, marketers, we can be boring, and the bigger the company we work for, the more likely that our marketing is boring. Admittedly, there are risks for pushing limits, but how else do we get our marketing to stand out if we don't? Well, you're about to get some guidance on that, because today's guest is not only a seasoned marketer, but also a multi-best-selling author on marketing topics, including his new book that we'll get into today. So joining me is Mark Schaefer. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on again. Again, this is your third time, so if this was SNL, you'd have a jacket by now.
All right. Well, I'll be watching the mail.
All right. Let's get into it, Mark. As I mentioned earlier, many marketers like to play it safe. So with fears like job security, overspending their budgets, or campaign fails, marketers want to take the safe bet. So what do you say to the marketer who wants to push the limit but has these fears?
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes there's a good reason to be boring. If there's legal constraints, let's say in the pharmaceutical industry, maybe in the wealth management industry. So, you know, I say, listen to the lawyers, don't go to jail. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, boring has been normalized in an industry. And it's like, since I wrote the book, I'm kind of like looking at marketing in a whole new way. If you think about like car commercials, they're all kind of the same. Or, you know, anything that's promoting wine, or my favorite example recently is pizza. I mean, pizza is supposed to be fun, and it's, you know, especially with young people. And I think the most creative thing we have in pizza is like nobody out pizzas the hut. What does that even mean? So I think that the really just we start to get into a rut where we just do things the same way. We do things because we're comfortable. We do things because we love working with an advertising agency that we have worked with for years and years. We don't really want to rock the boat. And yet, if we're competent, we're ignorable. If we're competent, you know, we're really vulnerable, because that's the theme of the book, that AI is competent. And if you're just working at a competent level, you're vulnerable because AI can take your job. I mean, AI is more than competent today.
Yeah, it is. In fact, so you mentioned your book, so I want to get into the book and AI. So first with the book, you push marketers to consider doing some things out of the box and being more than competent. So give us an example from the book that a marketer could easily see themselves immediately putting into action.
Well, what I did is I started to explore some of these marketing ideas and campaigns that really cut through the noise. That's what we
Hmm.
want, right?
Yeah.
Everyone listening to the show wants to be seen, wants to be heard, wants to be discovered. And what I found is that these case studies fell into one of three buckets. And that's really the format we need to be exploring. So what is marketing? It's telling your story. So if you disrupt the story, if you disrupt where the story is told, or disrupt who is telling the story, then we have an opportunity to start to stand out and be disruptive, to be, you know, audacious in some way. So let me give you, you know, a quick example of each one. So disrupt, and by the way, you don't need big budgets. There's a lot of like bombastic examples in the book, but there's also a lot of little ones. I tried to give lots of case studies that cover, you know, small businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, universities. So let's talk about telling your story in a new place. There's a company called Lithographs. What they'll do for book lovers is they'll print all the words of a book on a t-shirt or a blanket or something like that. So they had this promotion where they created a temporary tattoo for every sentence of a famous book, like Alice in Wonderland. So they sent out these tattoos to all their fans. They put them on a body part, took a picture of the body part, sent it back to the company. You can read the whole book on body parts. So that's,
That's
telling a
audacious.
story, in a different place. But there's, like I said, lots of examples. Let's talk about disrupting the actual narrative. And one of the things I talk about here is breaking taboos, breaking norms. We live by so many rules in marketing, and some of them are good, but sometimes we need to push the edges. We need to explore new ways to tell our story. And so in the book, I've got lots of examples of telling stories in new ways. And one of my favorite examples is Elf, the cosmetic company. Now, here's a company that generally appeals to young women with their relatively inexpensive cosmetics. And one of the things they do, I mean, they're completely disrupting the whole marketing landscape. They're a fascinating company to look at. And they basically said, we have no personas. We just look at the market day to day. Every day we wake up is like a new marketing day because they're leaning into the signals. Where are our customers now? And how do we tell the story in a new way? And one example is last year, actually it's 2023, they created a music video. And this music video became the number one video on YouTube, right? They created a shop on Roblox. Now, if you think about where do you expect a cosmetic company? How do you expect a cosmetic company to tell their story, right? Nobody's on Roblox. The third one is disrupting the storyteller. And the idea here is that, this is maybe hard to take for some people, but the research shows nobody really believes you. Trust in companies, brands, and advertising has declined 15 years in a row, according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. And so we need to have the courage to put the story in the hands of other people. Nielsen has this famous statistic. 92% of American adults will believe something if they hear it from another person, even a stranger, over advertising or over our marketing. So it's like, how do we, instead of just holding the mic and telling the story, how do we write a script and hold and give the mic to someone else to tell the story? Because that's what we believed. That's what we believe. So it gets into this idea of the math and the strategy behind word of mouth marketing. Now, let me just come back to a higher level principle. The subtitle of this book is Audacious: How Humans Win in an AI Marketing World. So all the themes of this book the themes are, where do we thrive? Where do humans persist? Even with AI. So let's take this word of mouth marketing example. We know
Okay.
word of mouth marketing is the most trusted, most unadulterated form of marketing, the best advertising you could ever have. And yet, Lee, how many companies have you worked with that have a line item in their budget for word of mouth marketing? None. It's almost completely ignored. And yet, that is something AI cannot touch. So it's like revisiting some of these ideas and saying, look, AI is going to be nipping at the heels of our skill sets, nipping at the heels of our jobs. There's an article in the New York Times today talking about how, are we starting to see the end of knowledge workers? Because AI is starting to creep in. And this book is like, here are the places where we will persist, where we can still thrive and excel.
Well, you mentioned, okay, let's talk about that space, that gap where humans can thrive over AI. Um, when you asked me about people who I work with, for example, who don't have a budget line item for word of mouth marketing, and the closest thing to that is a customer testimonial, or even worse, someone in the company talking about their product, which I don't think has any trust at all. But what can you say to companies maybe utilizing their people or just even user generated content to talk about their product as an actual user? Like, there should be a line item that says, let's capture people talking about our product naturally, organically, and then sharing that to the world.
Well, a big theme of the book and a powerful opportunity, I think, for humans to persist is this idea of shared experiences. We live in a world that's moving away from shared experiences. Many people today experience their world entirely through earbuds by themselves, in their living room. And so they're craving shared experiences. And this is an opportunity for companies.
If you're a marketer struggling to create content that's truly unique to your brand, here's the key. Your experts and executives are your most valuable content assets. Conversational content like videos and podcasts featuring your team stand out above all other content. So, instead of creating content that sounds just like your competition, start leveraging the unique voices inside your company. Thought leaders and authentic conversations build credibility and engagement. At Content Monster, we specialize in remote content production, meaning we coach your people to be comfortable on camera, then we capture and produce high-quality videos and podcasts featuring your team and customers. No need for expensive production crews, long production plans, or complex setups. Want to see how it works? Visit contentmonster.com today to learn more.
How can we bring people together in a meaningful way that creates something so interesting, so worthy, so memorable that they can't wait to talk about it with other people? They're not just seeing an ad; they're experiencing your brand in real life in some way. This is another huge opportunity to bring people together, and when you do that, I've got a whole chapter in the book about this. It creates this phenomenon called collective effervescence. It's this emotional contagion that happens, this excitement, this joy, this awe that happens when people come together. I mean, just a simple example. You're big into the music industry, and you probably enjoy listening to your favorite performers on your earbuds. That's fine. But when you go to a club, right? And I know you do DJing, and people are jumping up and down and singing and dancing. That's a whole new level. You're experiencing the same song, but you're creating awe. So now how do you apply that to businesses? How do you bring people together in ways where you add awe? What would your marketing look like if your plan was, let's add more awe to our marketing so people can experience this collective effervescence?
I want to unpack that a bit, the collective experience, because I've got a teenage son, and he admitted to me that when he goes into a new school or makes new friends, it's hard to find a group of people who have a common experience. Because take
Yeah,
music, for example.
yeah,
He admitted to me, he's like, Dad, we all have our own individual playlists,
yeah, right.
right? Used to, we would have one or two stations in our area. We all listen to the same one or two stations,
Yeah,
right?
right.
When an album came out, there's maybe one or two albums per week. They all came out on Tuesday. We all knew who was coming out. We had a collective experience. Now they come out any day of the week on SoundCloud for any individual artist who just decides to upload his song that day. So my son's catalog has everything from the new artist who recorded it on his phone 5 minutes ago to the Grammy award winning artist who's been around for decades. All that is in his library, but it's unique to him and not his collective friends.
Yeah,
And he's actually acknowledged that he wished he had more shared experiences with others. And so I think about that from a business realm in terms of marketing. I've had a client just yesterday ask about how to promote his podcast, and he made a statement about this thing doesn't exist, does it? And me and my colleague on the call was thinking to ourselves, of course it exists. There's thousands of podcasts like that. But the reason why he didn't know it existed is because it wasn't in his individual sphere of exposure.
Yeah.
And that again made me realize we have these little bubbles
Hmm.
that we don't have this collective experience. And to bring this back to I think that's probably driving even more of that because we're cranking out more content and making it more and more personalized. So, how do we use AI? Because marketers are going to use AI. We are going to use it to be more efficient,
Sure.
maybe more effective. The
Sure.
question is, how do we maintain that storytelling aspect and make sure the human's in the loop?
Well, first, I want to build on the comment that you made there, Lee, because it's so rich. There's so many rich things there. And I want to emphasize this is a massive opportunity. You're talking about your son's experiences, right? I mean, this is a massive opportunity for businesses. And AI. The other thing I wanted to mention on your comment is this idea that we have abdicated the selection of our content. We've outsourced it to AI. Spotify suggests things for me, and Netflix suggests things for me. And not only are we in a bubble, we're kept in the bubble
Yes,
by
very
AI.
carefully. Hmm.
Right. So this is another interesting idea that serendipity is a luxury today. Serendipity is not part of our normal lives. I told a story in the book about when I was a kid, just seeing a book cover in the library that kind of changed my life because I read this book and it kind of opened my eyes to some things. We don't have serendipity before. So I didn't want to miss that point that you're exactly right. That's also a business opportunity. How do we get people out of the bubble? And that brings us to AI because I think we have a lot of opportunity to create something that is incredible that will get them out of their bubble. Now, what does that mean? And this is sort of where I'm landing these days, that I think in the AI world, art will persist. I think we still love music and books and artwork that's associated with a person. There's some story behind it. There's this human connection. The things I cherish most of all is maybe, a card my daughter made me when she was 7, or a piece of furniture handed down through generations. There's a connection, there's a story behind it. So, what is art? Art is an expression of the human experience. AI will be able to mimic that. It will. It's going to come pretty close. About a month ago, there was a painting, an oil painting, created by a humanoid robot informed by AI that sold for $1.6 million. Now, is that a trend, or is it, okay, it's a gimmick, it's a milestone, so I'm going to buy this painting. But what this suggests, I think, Lee, is that content has been commoditized, and our content will have to approach the level of art. Just like this podcast, right? This is you and me. This is emotion. This is real. Maybe it's even a little bit of vulnerability. It can't be mimicked by AI. It's almost like jazz, right? I mean, you and I were creating this moment that will never be reproduced again. And I think that's a profound idea. And I think we should have a sense of urgency, all of our businesses, to get out of this vanilla valley, to get out of boring. And part of it means courage, having the courage to add our story, add our opinion, to be vulnerable, to take a stand, to add our own story to our narratives. That's what art is. And I think anything else we produce is just going to be commodity. We've got, I think, content in the future needs to approach the level of art.
Well, let me challenge that a little bit. I'm curious. So you and I are talking. We're having a conversation about marketing. We're sharing our experiences. What if it only means has a value to people who know? And this is going back to something I learned from you about being known,
Uh,
about people who know us. If you know Lee, you know
yeah,
Mark,
yeah,
and what we say has more meaning because you know, you understand where it comes from. You
yeah.
understand our
Oh,
backgrounds. You
beautiful
have
points.
emotional connection.
Yeah,
But if it were an AI generated podcast and you didn't know either one of us and you're listening to it, maybe it would be good enough for you. Maybe you would know the difference
yeah,
because I liken that to music. If you hear a song with great lyrics and the music is great and you know nothing about the artist, you could still fall in love with that song,
sure.
not knowing the
Absolutely.
artist.
Absolutely. So let me split that two ways, right? So I think you're right. I mean, there is a place for commodity content. Um, and there is a place for AI content, absolutely. The example I use in the book is sort of an obscure rock star in the UK who I love. I'm actually coming to see him in concert in Atlanta in a few months. It's a guy, Steven Wilson. And so Steven wrote recently in a post that he experienced, like, I guess it's like you could call it fan art of music that replicated him. And he said, look, he said, I couldn't tell it wasn't me. So really, what is my meaning? So this kind of like gets at both of your points here. So look, would I listen to Steven Wilson fan art? Yeah, out of curiosity. Would I go to a concert to listen to AI fan art? No. I want to go see Steven Wilson. I'm paying money for a ticket to go to Atlanta to see this dude, right? And that gets back to the personal brand. So all these things, they do go together. How do we survive and thrive in this AI world? It's rising above the noise with content that breaks norms, that disrupts in some ways. It's being known. It's the personal brand. I think the third pillar, which is what my last book was about, our last conversation, community, belonging to the brand, right? This is something that's also uniquely human that creates those shared experiences. Now, I didn't go down that rabbit hole in this book. This book, I just talked about one of those pillars, but it does all go together. What is a brand? A brand is creating an emotional connection between your customers and what you do. Does it help to be known that they like you, admire you, maybe even love you? Yes. Does it matter to be in a community where you get to know not only the people in the brand, but new friends? Yes, it's a deep emotional connection. And does it matter that you're disrupting content that creates awareness to start that process in the first place? Yes. You really need to be doing all three.
Marketers and sales leaders, if you want to close more deals and drive real revenue growth, you need cash. And I don't mean money. I'm talking about my new book, Cash, The 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and a Supercharged Revenue Machine. It gives you a proven framework to improve the 4 areas that impact revenue the most: communication, alignment, systems, and honesty. You need a stronger sales and marketing engine, and this book will show you how to build it. Get your copy now at aleejudge.com/cash. Now, back to the content. Community, personal brand, and what was the third one?
Disruptive marketing.
Disruptive marketing.
Yeah.
Speaking
Disruptive
of community,
Yeah.
yeah, the community part. So I'm a part of your Rise community, and I think it's probably the first community I've joined that I've had some real life experience and also an offline uh, Discord and type experience as well. And I appreciate what having that kind of community means, especially at a time when we're more disconnected ever since 2020, 2021 COVID era. Um, Tell me, is there anything that even has surprised you since building this community?
Oh, every day, every day. So, I created the community really, really as an experiment. I had tried a couple times before, but as I was writing Belonging to the Brand, which is about community, I realized all the things I did wrong.
Okay. Tell us about that.
So, I think the I mean, a brand community is counterintuitive in a lot of ways. It means giving up power. Means giving up control. The community directs where we're going next in the community. And by the way, this is the most powerful aspect of where we are, right? So think about scaling this for a brand. So in our community, our Rise community, we have people from all over the world, you know, contributing something every day that said, hey, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Now, how do I keep up in this world? Here's the truth. I can't do it by myself. Nobody can. So we need a community, I think, to stay relevant. And so the community is taking us in the new direction. Now, think about a brand. Think about some company where, cookies are going away, or at least they're sort of fragile, where people are not on social media. We don't have the social media, breadcrumbs like we used to in our listening platforms, especially younger people today. They're going into Discord and places like that. We can't see them. We can't hear them anymore. So, but in a community, it's direct first person feedback of what I'm trying, what I'm doing, what's important to me. Now, it's like, wow, why wouldn't a brand want to hear those things, learn those things, and have your biggest fans collaborate on where you're going next? So I think the biggest surprise for me is really how this community has become my university. This is the key to me being, relevant. And I think I can't say for every marketing profession or every profession, maybe things don't change as fast as marketing, like accounting or finance or something like that. But for a marketing professional, you cannot do it on your own. It's changing every day. You need a community to help you.
Here's something that I learned from being a part of the community is that as someone who doesn't work in an office with regular coworkers, I miss that water cooler moment where someone says, hey, did you hear about this new thing? Or did you read this article? Or, let me stop by my desk and let me show you this new technology I found. I miss those things. But in a community, we're sharing things like that, like new technologies, new experiences, new events. And so that's been the biggest takeaway for me from the community is having those water cooler moments with like-minded or even more intelligent individuals than I am to learn.
Think about, social media is like this endless stream of, stuff. But in a community, you have someone posting a link who has read it and usually summarized it for you.
Hmm.
And it's sort of like it's like a curated stream of the best stuff that's out there. So yeah, it's a very powerful way to like recapture those cooler moments.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I want to go back. You mentioned something about cookies and these relics of tracking how we did marketing. And I know you and I both have our beefs with performance marketing. And I know I certainly do because I'd spent a career measuring marketing and trying to convince leadership of the value of the efforts we've made in marketing. So now that we're talking about marketers being more audacious, it's going to come up. How do you measure audacious?
Yeah. Well, first I want to emphasize I'm not necessarily against performance marketing, but we've become obsessed with it to sort of a toxic level because it is easy to measure. And so it's like if things are more difficult to measure, then you know we maybe we ignore it. And it's something that you can't ignore because brand marketing is more difficult to measure, but that's your future growth. That's what distances you from your competition because you freaking mean something. And you don't have to compete on SEO and coupons and shelf space every day because, you mean something and people will advocate for you and maybe they'll even pay more because it's you. So, brand marketing is more difficult to measure, specifically this idea of disruption. And I encourage people in this book to take a step, away from the norms of their industry. And I actually created a little formula later in the book about how to measure that. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I'll tell you, I'll give you a little secret. Or maybe it's not a secret because maybe you and I are friends. Maybe I've told you this before, but it's a secret for your listeners. When I was finished with the book, I uploaded it to ChatGPT and also to Claude. And I said, what's missing in the book? And both LLMs came back with the exact same thing.
Mm.
And it said, you need a chapter on measurement. Now, in my original outline for the book, I had a chapter on measurement. And so, here's AI calling me out. It's kind of spooky, but I realized AI was right that I was being lazy. I wasn't doing the hard thinking, the hard original work I needed to do. I think if I'm challenging people to be disruptive, to step out a little bit, how do you know you're doing it? How do you know it's different than your competitors? And it's not a perfect measurement system, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think it has to be sort of tweaked for every company and every industry, but at least it gives you something to plant your flag on.
So you're saying that in the book, you give us some hints on how to measure Audacity.
Yeah, I look at, for example, how big of a risk was this? Culture is marketing. Culture is marketing. So if you have a very uptight, buttoned down culture, that's what's going to show up, right? If you have a loose culture that really is into serving the customer in every way and being open, then that's going to show up. Okay. So if you're an uptight, buttoned down culture, what's audacious for you is going to be a tiny step in the right direction. And that's okay. That might be a bigger risk than, someone who's taking risks all the time. So it's relative for each company. So there's 5 different things that you can take a look at to come up with this compiled score.
Okay. Well, I want to wrap up by encouraging the viewers and listeners to check out Mark's latest book, Audacity. And I'll tell you, I know, Mark, you have your favorites. They're all your babies, but I'm going to tell you which ones are my favorites. It's, first it was Known. That's what introduced me to you, and it has made a profound change in how I move about. So Known, Cumulative Advantage, and now Audacious is my favorite. So
Awesome.
you have many others. So if you check out Mark, please dive into all his books. And yes, I said dive in real life. Humans do say dive and delve sometimes. But yeah, check Mark out. So Mark, how would you like to end this? How else can we learn about you and get involved in maybe your communities or your books?
Well, how I'd like to end this is, first of all, to thank you because you're always so well prepared, ask me great questions. And I love every question that says, I love any question that says, I want to challenge you on that. We need to do more of that in this world, and end up being friends after a conversation like
Yeah.
that. I also want to say, we've covered a lot of ground, but I just want to emphasize that the subtitle of a book I wrote called Marketing Rebellion is The Most Human Company Wins, and I believe that. So really, you got it. The theme of Audacious is dig down deep and find that humanity that AI can't touch, right? And part of that is personal brand. Part of that is the community. And then, look, I would love to hear from your listeners and viewers. It's easy to find me. All you have to do is remember, businesses grow. If you can find Businesses Grow, that's my website. You can find my blog, my podcast, my books, and all my social connections.
Awesome. Well, once again, Mark, I mentioned this is your third time, so you might get a jacket for the third time or Business of Marketing. And also, thanks to the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast and want to see Mark and I, video of the podcast and others are available on the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as aleejudge.com.